Levi, I wanted to talk to you specifically about teaching and the philosophy of teaching. And just to kind of set the stage here, I want to talk about like what I think about when I think of bad teaching. When I was in 6th grade, I didn't play music. I did all sorts of geeky stuff. I did like magic tricks and like yo-yos and origami. Like, yeah, I was just, I was not cool.
I did those things too.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, juggling. I was into juggling. And then, so 6th grade, all my family is into music. My dad, my mom, my brother. And here I am thinking like, okay, I just don't have the music gene, right? And I'm in 6th grade music and they give me the bell. They give you one bell. Like, here, you're the note C, you're the note E. Now play the note C when the note C comes up on the page. And like, I was confused. I couldn't read the music. I didn't understand what was happening. I hated it. I hated my life. It was like, okay, I'm clearly not a musician. I will never be a musician. There's two kinds of people on this planet, the people that have it and the people that don't, and I'm clearly one of the people that don't. And obviously, that wasn't the case. But my question is, how could you have a music teacher so bad at teaching music that they couldn't pull out whatever tiny bit of musical aptitude I had at 6th grade? So to me, that's like a shining demonstration of what, to me, a bad teacher is at its fundamental level.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
So do you have anything in your life that's like even remotely close to that, where you've seen just a level of horrible, teaching on that level, where it's like they've defied the whole point of it?
Well, I mean, before like really getting into any of this, I think it's worth. This is such a difficult conversation, right? Because it almost feels like we're gatekeeping who can and can't teach, or who should and shouldn't teach.
And exactly, I want to talk about
which
that.
is something I have talked about in the past. But I very much like yourself, I think it is an important subject to talk about, because we are talking ultimately about how to better everybody in our industry. I don't think anybody is incapable of teaching. You just have to take it very seriously, because much like yourself, my experience was nowhere near as bad as that. But what I have always found is music education, at least over here in the UK, is very formal when it happens, and therefore the people that tend to do music lessons are, in schools at least, are all of classical music backgrounds, and that also tends to mean that they come from families with money. And I didn't come from a family with money in any way, shape or form. I came from the complete opposite. So when I decided to pick up music, which was around, what would I have been, maybe 14 or 15, when we go in to take our GCSEs or choose our subjects for GCSE, when I said to our music teacher, I think I've decided I'm going to do music, he was absolutely flabbergasted by this and spent a good couple of weeks trying to talk me out of that and saying this probably isn't for you. And I can't understand why that is. Is it a bad teacher? Is it a you don't belong thing? Is it a lack of confidence in your ability to help the person grow as a musician? Because spoilers, I think of just about everybody that was in my class at that time, I don't know if any of them are still working in the industry, but here I still am all these years later.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. As far as gatekeeping and who can be a teacher and who can't be a teacher, I think that's a really important topic, because what you're saying is that so much of the music lessons out there are formalized and academic, and I would say the same thing goes out here. But I got extremely lucky. When I was in high school, I went to a music store. I had long hair. I was working at like a fast food joint, and I went to this music shop and I said, "Hey, can I teach guitar lessons here?" And they said, "Well, currently our current guitar teacher, Jason or Jerry or whatever." Oh, he's a drunk and he comes in every Monday, or he cancels every Monday because he's drinking all the weekend. So yeah, you can start this Wednesday. And like I'm in high school. I couldn't even sight read. Okay, I literally just walked in and it's like, oh, I think I'll just try teaching guitar because I teach like 3 of my friends how to play Metallica songs. So I was thrown into the pit. I was thrown into that stew completely unprepared. I feel guilty for those initial students I had. I had like a 4th grade girl. I'm trying to teach her Metallica riffs. Not a good way to teach a young student. I had no idea what I was doing. But over that 2 years of being thrown into that pit, I developed my own teaching style that I'm really happy with. I'm happy with the results that I see, reflected back at me. And if we only reserved teaching to people with degrees, it's like I feel like that would have completely limited my ability to ever do this. So I don't ever want to say that there's a certain requirement academically that makes a good teacher. I think the requirements for a good teacher are something a little bit more simple. Like they make good students. A good teacher is somebody who makes a student who's enthusiastic and motivated and curious. That to me is the hallmark of a good teacher.
Sure.
Not if their student gets, passes all the tests. Not if their student is the fastest or the most technical.
Yep.
But those are the things that mean a lot more to me as a teacher.
Yeah, yeah, totally. You're talking about like inspiring passion in people.
Absolutely,
And you
absolutely.
reference that Jason or Jerry or whatever his name was. You don't even remember his name, and that says everything
No,
that needs to be said, because he
yeah,
didn't take the job seriously. And much like yourself, I sort of fell into teaching without really paying much attention to why I'd found my way there. I started
mm,
teaching when I was 16 or 17, but I was certainly very young. When I was in
ah,
high school, my chemistry teacher, she knew that she was my personal tutor as well. She knew me very well. She knew that I was more than capable of explaining myself. I communicate well, so she essentially used me as a babysitter. One night a week after school, she said, "Well, my kids want to learn to play guitar, and I need to stay late this evening. So could you possibly teach them both?" And then she said, "I'll pay you." And at that moment, I'm like, "Oh, this sounds fantastic."
yeah,
And
that's
initially,
dream come
yeah,
true.
I look back and look at those students and maybe feel a little bit guilty, but you very quickly start to realize if teaching is for you, and if you start to become passionate about the art of education and communication and putting ideas across and helping and inspiring young people. So yeah, I can relate. I totally relate.
That's pretty funny that we both kind of got thrown in there way too young. I mean, I had adult students, and I remember thinking, like, how are they possibly? Why are these people signing up for me? Like, how can you be 38 and trust me? Like, like, why would you trust me? But I'm so grateful for the fact that that happened. That I mean, realistically, I shouldn't have been hired. Realistically, I had no business teaching, but through complete, fortune, I was allowed to, and I was allowed to develop it, and I was allowed to turn it into something that, I really enjoy and develop my own style through that. So, to me, it's like that to me. I mean, I was going to ask you, what is your general teaching philosophy? Because to me, it's just about, like what you said, inspiring passion. Not everybody's going to be, shredding. Not everybody has that, you've probably had students where their speed limit is going to
Oh
be
yeah,
low. There's something in the fingers or in the neurology or in, maybe there's some trauma
yeah,
in there, like, we're talking brain trauma, where they're just never going to play fast.
yep,
And that's fine. We
sure.
can still find a ceiling that they have that's rewarding and enjoyable and expressive and creative. And like that to me is what it's all about, getting everybody to their maximum
Yes,
that's enjoying it. And like, I don't really care how good you are or how fast you are. I care if it's part of your life now, and if you've somehow, you're being rewarded through your own musical,
yeah.
exploits.
Well, my philosophy of teaching has changed so dramatically over the years as I've changed as a person, as I've become more experienced in education, and also sort of found my own voice on the instrument, found who I am as a player. I've dramatically changed my philosophy in teaching. So when I was younger, it was very much kind of inspired by everything I was seeing around me. It was very inspired by getting students that were coming into a certain degree of technical proficiency.
Yes.
But as the years have gone by, and maybe this comes down to I don't need to teach as much anymore. Long gone are my days of teaching 40 students a week in a music school. The students that come to me because they want to learn the things that I teach, which is a much, much cooler thing to be
That's
working on.
great. It's a
But
great spot to be in.
now, when I do get somebody that happens to be local and they've heard that I give good guitar lessons, the main difference is everything for me now is about musicality. Everything is about developing the ear and making you a more reactive player, somebody that can. I mean, hopefully, if you have lessons with me for a few years and then let's say the worst thing happens and you're in a terrible accident and you lose a hand and you can't play guitar anymore, I would like to think that the skills that you've developed in lessons with me have resulted in you having such a deep understanding and appreciation of the music that you're listening to that you'll still get that level of enjoyment out of the music still.
Yes.
So yeah, 100% musicality. I can't remember the last time I said, right, here's a scale, let's play this up and down, because where's the music?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It has evolved quite a bit. I can say, for sure that my only priority when I started was, create as many shredders as possible, convert as many kids to listening to Dream Theater as possible, and then, fortunately for everyone, that kind of, that got washed away and subsided over the years, through learning different music and life experiences.
I have a question for you on that one then. So because
yes,
I can
of course.
totally relate to that. Do you remember when you were younger and you would come across more experienced players or even teachers that would kind of take that attitude of they'd look at all these things that you were teaching, all these things you go on about Dream Theater, or for me it was the Shrapnel guys,
Yeah.
and they looked at you with very much you'll grow out of it one day, and you were very teenage adolescent, pushing against the grain, looking up at the old guys going, nah, they don't know what they're talking about, and now you look and go, yep, I wish I'd listened a little bit more when I was younger.
That's really funny. I would say partially yes. I
Okay.
didn't get it so much from teachers and other musicians as much I did from my dad, who's he's an experienced drummer
Right.
in his heyday, and he's just a music guy. He actually used to be a recording engineer
Okay.
for Motown way back in the day.
Oh,
He
wow.
worked with Smokey Robinson and stuff like that, and then he lived a different life as an air traffic controller. But he's the one that always kind of instilled that, okay, you're going to get over this sooner or later. Like, let's talk about good music. I don't care what a polyrhythm is. Nobody cares about your Phrygian dominant. Like, let's listen to like a song with one chord. Listen to what Sonny and Cher did. It's one chord. Everybody loved it.
Yeah.
And yeah, at that time it was like, oh, what are you talking about? Where's my Lydian? Like, I really cared about that stuff. So he was the one that was instilling that music wisdom into me. But I actually saw a lot of not so much dismissiveness from older musicians, but actual confusion. I learned that very few of my musical colleagues, even at the music store that I was working at, actually cared about advanced topics. I was exploring polyrhythm and none of them cared.
Yeah.
I had one person that's like, oh yeah, we learned that in college, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, and to me it was like, wait, aren't you fascinated by this? Like, this is a whole different world of rhythm. And I remember talking about modes to more than one of the piano teachers, and them just not getting it like I got it, like not understanding a modal tonality. And I remember thinking, like, how can this be? How can you be trained? So, the musical wisdom of like getting over it comes with age, and fortunately I had it instilled in, through my dad initially.
Yeah.
But I did see a surprising amount of confusion and lack of interest from the professional music teachers around me. And I just remember thinking, like, how can you be a music teacher if this doesn't get you going, if this isn't exciting to you?
Well, like talking about like the old way, the way things used to be done. I feel that's really where the problem comes with all of this stuff. Because if you think about the history of musicians, what we have done, what we have been here for, up until very recently in the history of our civilization, a musician's job was essentially to be a record player. Your job was to recreate something that somebody else wrote that was on a page, because that was how people heard the music. And part of developing that skill set to do that, this is that old classical way of teaching. You're going for your first piano lesson and you're just playing scales. Sit down with a metronome, up, down, practice your fingerings and all of that stuff. And I think the first thing that really does is it trains you to remove any sort of passion for what is possible in your music, but to train you to be the machine that you need to be in order to do the classical stuff. And with that comes subjects like modes. And, well, it doesn't matter. We can glaze over that. It's not important because you'll never need it. You'll never need to think about what you play. You'll only ever have to look at what's on the page and read it back to me. And, yeah, it comes back to what I was saying about musicality. That's just not... It's not compatible with, I think, really inspiring people to be musicians.
That's a very good point, and I'm surprised I can't believe I never thought about it at that simple of a level, that like, oh yeah, music training is still just to turn you into a music box. Like, and like, there's no time for learning modes. There's no time for, learning just basic stuff that like is fun for musicians, for the reason I kept playing, the reason I'm interested in it now is because I started making music, not just because I was trying to learn it.
And well, growing up, how many people did you know that learnt piano? How many kids are forced to play piano because their parents think it's a good idea? And then of that number, literally, how many of them give up as soon as they have a choice in the matter? And why is that? It's because of the teachers. It's because the teachers do not inspire them to enjoy the instrument. And that, I think, is really the crux of what we were here to talk about today.
And I do feel that, especially here, I'm not sure exactly how the music system works out there, but here we have this real problem, in my opinion it's a problem, where the instruments you're giving these kids when they're in their formidable years of music development, high school and middle school, you're giving them the tuba, you're giving them the clarinet, you're giving them, the saxophone. Well, these are great instruments, but, the stuff that these kids are listening to is either all done with synthesizers, it's all done on guitar, drums, bass, and these are irrelevant instruments to inspiring a child or anybody that's young. If you want to inspire them, how are you going to inspire them with the tuba? It's going to take a very special kind of child to be inspired through that instrument. And they're going to have a really good teacher at the same time. So it feels like we've completely missed the point. Whereas, like, how about you get them inspired on music early on, and then they can find, oh, actually brass instruments have quite a lot to offer. I really like the tone and timbre. I want to learn that, because you've already set the seeds early on of music inspiration, of music exploration, of music appreciation. So it's completely backwards out here. And some of the high schools offer jazz quartets and jazz combos where a guitar player can get in there, but it's woefully unstaffed and unprepared to teach kids about modern music.
Yeah, and well, it's exactly the same over here, to be honest. And
Yeah.
I have thought about why, and it is very much what I mentioned earlier when I was talking about, that teacher that tried to stop me from doing music. And the reason he did that is because everybody that does music over here comes from money, and part of being in a family that comes from money means you tend to be exposed to different levels of culture. You tend to have been exposed to classical music, so that is something that maybe isn't cool to you, but is certainly something that is culturally important to you and your family. Whereas the average kid that grew up on some little council house scheme, who's never eaten in a restaurant, let alone been to an opera, they can't listen to a violin and go, "Oh, this brings back so many memories." You know what I mean? Like it's not. You're absolutely right. Synthesizers. This is why the guitar is the most popular instrument. Well, I'm making an assumption there, but it's because it's so easy to pick up and so easy to play. It might be dying off, and maybe this. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that keyboard and synthesizers were more popular now. But for the same reason, technology has allowed us to do that.
Right. Well, I mean, when I think about, at least here, what the kids are doing, when I talk to, my younger students and the music interest that their friends are pursuing, guitar is by the wayside right now for kids that want to make beats. They all want to be an EDM producer. They all want to buy Serum and Nexus and make their own, whatever. I think that's a more popular, subset, at least maybe in the neighborhood, maybe we're in the group that I'm in, this middle class, neighborhood. But yeah, I think, here's one of the things I wanted to ask you. Okay, we kind of got over this idea of what makes a good teacher, and I think we're on the same page with that. We're developing musicality. I totally agree with that. To me, it's also inspiring motivation and inspiration. To me, if my student isn't practicing, that's 90% my fault. If they're not practicing, it's because I didn't find a way to motivate them. I didn't find a way to just build that passion in there. And you can't do that with every student. Some students are just not motivatable, and that's a very small minority. But for the most part, I've learned that if they're not practicing, that's my problem. That's not their problem so much. So I think we're kind of on the same page as far as instilling musicality and inspiring people. But what do you think specifically makes a bad teacher? In your experiences, other than discouraging? I mean, it sounds like your one experience is somebody discouraging a goal of yours. You had this goal, and they just immediately dismiss it and discourage it. Can you think of any other elements that you would associate with just bad teachers?
Oh, easily. So it's. I was thinking whilst you were saying that, a sign of a good teacher is everything you talked about there is the sign of a good teacher. You not only care about your students' goals, but your performance as a teacher. The fact that you would even assess whether or not your students practicing, and that would have any impact on whether on your care in the world, it says good teacher, right? So to me, a bad teacher is the opposite of that. A bad teacher is somebody that, we all know these guys, right? They play in bands. The bands don't make any money, so they make a little bit of money on the side teaching guitar. And every single student that they have is just a blank face. Yeah. They don't remember who the person is when they turn up for their lessons. There's absolutely no sense of where the student's path is going, the things that they want to learn, and the pathway that they need to take in order to do that. The idea of lesson objectives and goals that we'll be achieving in this lesson, the reasons we do those, and where you would be going from those in our next lesson. None of that is present with a bad teacher. A bad teacher is really there to take up an hour of your time for as little effort as possible and get some money out of the situation.
Very succinctly put. That is I think that's a definition of a bad teacher right there. You're bringing up to mind another teacher I had the pleasure of working with, who was, I won't mention his name because I actually remember this guy's name. I just remember always walking past that lesson studio, and seeing a student with that blank face, like they had just been, electroshock therapy, and there's just nothing left. And I'm telling you that it was book one, Hal Leonard, book one, and then Hal Leonard, Guitar Method Book 2, and then Hal Leonard, Guitar Method Book 3, and then the Jazz Book, and then it was just like here is how you learn guitar, and I couldn't fathom how you could think you've got a 10-year-old girl here that likes Taylor Swift, and you've got a 29-year-old guy that likes Led Zeppelin, and you're teaching them the exact same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
How could you possibly think that that would be an efficient way? Or you just not care? Are you just there to take up somebody's time? And
Yeah.
I would think that some of it is just that. Some people are just lazy. They just, clock in, clock out. But there is that other level of people that really are greedy with it. I mean, this is why I really admire what you do so much on your channel specifically. I love your absolute, fearlessness with calling out people that are just doing scummy business practices and like exploiting people that are,
Well-
either vulnerable. I mean, that's what the thing I really like the most. The thing that inspires me the most about what you do is that level of your work, that fearlessness. And
So I was going to go down that path now in response to what you were saying, and I'm not going to name names, but here's the other thing, the sign of a bad teacher. It's somebody that's primary goal is the making of their money rather than their students, right? And that can come about from many. There are many signs of someone that does that. If someone sets up guitar teaching in your local area and they significantly try and undercut you in terms of cost, that's a sign of a bad teacher, because all they care about is getting that money in rather than the product they can deliver. All of your teachers in your area should be able to charge the same amount, because you should all be offering a decent level of service. You should all be offering the same service. But the biggest sign for me, and the thing that really made my YouTube thing blow up, was finding all of these teachers that their modus operandi is not necessarily to be the best teachers, but to go out there and discredit the methods of other teachers. So instilling this sense of, they're essentially trying to use the internet in order to steal you away from your current teacher by planting this seed that what your teacher is teaching you is incorrect. And I think that's the most parasitic approach to teaching, because I appreciate that when I'm saying things like that, it might appear that I'm doing the same to guys like that, but I'm not talking about their methods of teaching. I'm talking about their business ethics. I don't see teachers like yourself, because you have a YouTube channel and there is a limited period of time in the world. People have a limited period of time in life, so time that they spend watching your videos is time they could be spent watching my videos. But I don't see people like you or local teachers or anything like that as competition. In fact, I actually think we should be working more together as a community, because great teachers don't contradict each other. Great teachers have things that are in line with each other. I have a network of teachers. Probably one of my best friends is Martin Miller, and he's a great guitar player, great teacher, signature Ibanez guitar, everything you need to know about the guy. That is his pedigree, and he sends students my way because he knows that when his students go on to me, I'm not going to contradict the things that he's been working on them with. I'm going to add gravitas to the things that he has taught them. And likewise, if there's something that I'm not 100% confident on, and there are, like the subject of modern metal, polyrhythms, I understand it, but it's certainly not something that I would want to teach and pretend to be an authority on. I know the areas that I'm an authority on. I'm confident to pass these people on to other people on the scene, because ultimately it's not about my bank balance. It's all about the student getting what they need out of the situation. So the bad teacher is the one that's trying to keep hold of you for as long as possible. A good teacher makes themselves redundant as fast as possible.
Okay, so one of my general teaching philosophies, you hit it 100%. It's a self-defeating philosophy, is that my job as a guitar teacher is to make it that you never need a guitar lesson again, that you can do everything on your own, that you never need a teacher, and you can go into any route or realm or aspect of music, and you can pursue it with the knowledge that I've given you. And then you might say, okay, well, I need a new teacher because I'm not quite prepared in jazz, but, at least Jake got me prepared where I can at least parse jazz on my own and understand what I need on it. Okay, now I want to learn counterpoint, and maybe I'm not that good at it, so maybe I'll take some lessons, but at least I understand the basics of it. Now I can pursue it without feeling too daunted. That's to me is like the whole job, is to get people free immediately, get them so they don't have to pay for lessons. And it's like, that is a self-defeating business model. It's a horrible business model, but it's really, really, really freaking rewarding as a teacher, when you think that way and when you work that way, and then the results come back after the years. It's one of the most rewarding things I can think of. Now, what you said is really, you said a few things I agree with 100%. This whole idea of dismissing other people's teaching styles and acting like, oh, that's the poison fruit, and if you touch the poison fruit, you'll get poison, you'll never be able to play again. I mean, it's a complete cult mentality. It's a complete the people that start cults do this exact same thing where, new ideas are not allowed in. If you eat the forbidden fruit, you will somehow be, banished from the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really ridiculous old mentality, and it still works. It still works when people are clearly manipulating, the thought process of other people. And I have so little respect for it. And here's one of the things why I like what you're doing so much on YouTube is that, you call that stuff out, and it's like, first, what you do gives me two motivations to be a better person. And hopefully, if it works that way for me, it works for other people that just stumble across your videos. I have the motivation of like, hey, this guy is actually doing the work, and he's not surrounded by, ads and sponsors. He doesn't have a tattoo of Fender on his face. He's not, doing, every 5 minutes, it's subscribing my button. Like, that's nice to see.
Well, I do have a Dream Theater tattoo, so.
But that's awesome to hear, actually. I'm sure it was more awesome to hear, if you had told me that 15 years ago. But, so like, it's to see you doing that. And then there's that motivation of like, hey, this guy's doing it, and that means I can do it too. You can create content and not be a complete soulless, walking commercial. But then also seeing you call other people out gives me the motivation like, man, I never want to show up in one of his videos. I never want Levi Clay making a video like Jake Lizzio exposed, so that is a good motivation, and the fact that you're out there doing your thing means you're slightly correcting the world in one way or the other, whether you know it or not. It has those adjustments. So that's why I respect what you're doing as far as that, because I'm not going to be in the business of making those kind of videos yet, the ones that you make, but I appreciate the hell out of them. I appreciate anybody that goes out there and says it how it is, regardless of the litigation that might ensue.
Yeah, so respect through fear is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yes. And you mentioned litigation. Like, that is a world I doing what I do. Man, I've dealt in that. But when you deal with literal cults, and I use the term literally, like literal, I can point you in the direction of actual guitar cult communities.
I'm well aware.
Yeah, and I know we're all on the same page on this stuff. I don't feel the need to. Again, I don't want to take issue with the things they teach, but it's the business practice behind it. When they go out of their way to say the things that guy over there is teaching are bad and won't help you achieve anything, I'm not going to sit here and say the things they teach aren't going to help you. Of course they will. Everything helps. Right. All knowledge helps. Right. While you were saying all of that, I was thinking like another, like a great example of a bad thing that makes a bad teacher is the classic Dunning-Kruger thing, right? That feeling of dealing with someone who thinks that they've learned everything that there is to know. And you'll see it all the time. Like, it's easy to appear that you're that person, right? But I will hopefully never be that person, because I will never, ever stop learning. I will never, ever stop being a student myself. I picked this up while you were talking. The Randy Vincent Cellular Approach. I love this book, and I've been working through this book for, it's been the best part of a year now, and I'm constantly working through books. I'm constantly looking at new instructional material. I'm constantly having lessons with people, because not necessarily because you've got things to learn about lines or whatever it happens to be, but because as a teacher you will always learn how to better communicate. You will always learn someone else's approach to explaining a subject, and I think bad teachers don't do that. Bad teachers, they have their thing, which might be 3-note per string, Paul Gilbert style shred stuff, and that's it. And that's the thing that you have to learn when you study with them. And that's not what good teachers do. Good teachers don't do that. I agree. They take you where you want to be in music. So
I agree 100%. The idea of closing knowledge off. I mean, let's face it. We're not talking about medicine here. We're not saying that if you get bad medicine advice, you might kill somebody. That's true. You shouldn't learn your medicine. You shouldn't learn to be a doctor off the internet. I don't want my surgeon having just read Reddit and I just YouTubed how to do this hearts. I don't want that. But we're talking about creativity here. We're talking about musicality, and the idea that don't look at somebody else's approach. Don't learn that topic. Don't do it this way is the opposite of what creativity is about. Creativity and expression is about more options, more choices, more freedom to do things, not more limitations and saying, there's only one way to do this. It's remarkable that people still do that, but I think you're right that it's because their main motivator is making money. That is the number one motivator. And I'm not saying teachers can't make money. Teachers have to make money. Sure. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to teach. They're going to be back in manufacturing. That would be me. I'll go back there if things don't work out. Yeah. So, we have to make money. But if that's the only motivation, then I think inevitably you're going to end up with bad teaching.
Yeah, and
I don't think there's a way around that.
I'll post a counter option to that. Like, you're right. Sure, you need money. We all need money in order to survive. But that's not the only richness that you can get from teaching, or the only riches.
Absolutely.
I have a student, patron, long-term friend now, I would consider him. He has bought my books on slide guitar, and this week he sent me a track that he'd recorded, and it's so good. Like, it's so, I'd listened to it, and he thinks it's worthless, but honestly, I listened to this track, and my first thought is that's better than anything I'm going to do on slide guitar. It's so creative, and I thoroughly enjoy it, and I don't look at that and feel threatened. I look at it and feel nothing but joy, because I can't. It's so good, I can't take credit for it. You know what I mean? Like, I just have to listen to it and go, I played a tiny part in that. The tiniest of parts, but that is worth more than hours and hours and hours of teaching a person and getting some money out of it. Like, I've helped to make music. I've helped to put some emotional content into the world that someone out there might enjoy. That's priceless.
You got it, man. I mean, you're preaching from my book right here. Seriously. I mean, to me, the fact that there's going to be, potentially thousands of people out there that are going to be making music that wouldn't have made music. Just like in 6th grade, if that was the end of my music career, it's like, well, my music teacher gave me the bell and I don't understand and I hate it, I would have never done anything. But, the fact that one person, me, I learned to teach, now there's going to be 1,000 people that might be inspired to write a song. And that song might get played, on a radio station, that somebody hears it and it inspires, a book, or, they get, it creates it's their song now. It's the memory that's stuck in there. I mean, there's so many potentials when you're teaching, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to make an album. Well, it's really hard to get one album, out to the world. But when 1,000 people are making an album, that's just insane amount of art production. I think it's it's the most valuable thing out of it. You can't put a price on that. Yeah. To me, a really good example for me, one of the most rewarding ones, is I had a student who came to me in about 6th grade. Her mom signed her up, and she's your classic, she was a girl that wasn't very coordinated, wasn't very talented, nothing came easy to her, and we just kept doing it. And she didn't practice much, but I kept trying to make it fun. We tried to make it fun. Finally, 2.5 years after trying to make it fun and her never practicing, she got grounded for smoking weed in her room. And of course, what can you do if you're grounded? All you can do is play your guitar. You can't get on your phone. So she got on there and she got obsessed. She started practicing. She came in with, Jake, you're going to teach me this song. Jake, you're going to teach me this song. So it caught. It finally caught. Yeah. And now it's like maybe 5-6 years later, she's about to go to college, and she called me up. She's like, Jake, I wrote a song. Can you help me record it? Yes, finally. And she's, she sang it and she played it and she strummed it. And it's not the greatest thing, but it's an artistic expression. I mean, I could never make that song. Jake Lizzio could never make the song that she wrote. Yeah. And now that song exists into the world. And I had some play, I wonder how long would it have taken to exist if I wasn't there to teach? Yeah. It would have taken a lot longer for something like that to come out. That makes all the difference in the world.
I don't think it would have existed.
It might not have. If she had gotten my music teacher, it probably wouldn't.
She'd be playing bells.
Yes, for about 1 week.
Yeah. No, that's
so. Here's
that's
a question
incredible.
for you. I wanted to know, so I'm sure you're like me, where you've got some students that only take lessons for a year or two, and, wait, really quick, I wanted to touch on this idea of competition and, seeing people as colleagues. If you're worried about another teacher, that to me just tells you, it's just insecurity. Why would I ever be worried about another teacher in my area taking my business or my competence or stealing from me, when it's I know that my teaching skills are good enough where people are going to value them. Yeah. And if you know that your teaching skills are valuable enough or good enough that people will value them, there's no problem here. Some people might like you more. Some people might like me more. We're both going to offer a service. So when people get into that snipey territory, it's it's pretty clear that it's just insecurity. Yeah. The only reason you would see another guitar teacher on YouTube as competition is because you've just completely insecure with yourself. And
also, stop trying to see your students as property.
Yeah, they're not yours. Yeah, just because they took I love it when people comment on my videos and they comment about, comparing it to other videos, and they talk about, this reminds me of this, this Neely video or this Beato video. I love that people are getting those other opinions. I'm not the authority here.
Yeah.
I'm just another voice. That's all I am.
I had the misfortune of uploading triad pairs videos recently, and I got a few comments of really snide comments of just, I subscribe to jazz duets too. And I'm like, what? Sorry, do you think that I've just discovered this concept? I'm sure he's probably read the Gary Campbell book, the Triad Pairs book, or Expansions. This isn't a new concept that was invented a couple of weeks ago by someone on YouTube. And as a community of teachers, we we talk, we know each other, like, and some people do want to be on the outside and treat us like the enemy, but really, I think the thing that's made this whole thing cool and that made this whole thing grow is I can get on a Skype call with you and talk about music and inspire the people that watch me and you.
Right.
I was on a call with Rick Beato the other night, just talking, like hearing hearing loss and ear training, and
Right.
that's incredible. I don't see these people as, and I should, because you've all got much more subscribers than I do. But you know, there's, like I say, it's me. This is a lesson for me. Still, I'm learning. From all of these experiences. So there's no competition. There's no competition.
Yeah, it all helps me out. I mean, the idea that I would ever see, Rick Beato or Adam Neely's competition. I know that people go to Adam Neely's channel to see Adam Neely videos, and I know they're coming to my channel to see Jake Lizzio videos. Yeah. I can't make an Adam Neely video. There's no way I could make an Adam Neely video. I have this lurking suspicion that he could make a Jake Lizzio video, but I think the way the world works is that, like, people are coming to me for what I'm good at, and people are coming to Levi for what Levi's good at, and people are coming to Rick Beato for what Rick's... Like, that doesn't hurt me at all. Like, I can't replace them. I can't make a Rick Beato video, so why would I ever think of them as competition? Yeah. To me, it's just make content that, is better. If I want to see that as just make better content, and hopefully I can get more people that are interested in Jake Lizzio videos. So it's a pretty simple equation, if you ask me.
And it's worked well for you, so...
I've been very lucky. I don't know why it worked out. I think it's just, I'll be honest with you, I think it's the voice. I think it's like...
You do have a great voice.
If I made the exact same videos, but I sounded like this, I think that, like, I'd probably have, 30,000 subscribers, and that's it.
Well, you've set a challenge there. So you said you didn't want a Levi Clay exposes you video. I think I'm going to do a voiceover video for you. See how well that goes down. I would enjoy
every minute of that. Yeah, voice expo. Okay, so last video I posted was on inverted chords, and I accidentally made the dumbest mistake where I'm like, well, the lowest note of your A chord is E. Like, I don't know how I said it. I never caught it until like the fourth edit. I'm like, shit, did I really say that? So I went in there and I actually overdubbed my voice to say my... So there's this conspiracy. You keep seeing this conspiracy on my comments, like this guy overdubs his voice. Well, in this case, I actually did. I went in there and like Melodyne. It sounds perfect. And now, because it disrupts the flow of the lesson. I don't want to correct a mistake. I'm trying to get people in this nice flow of like learning the information. And then you make a mistake that dumb, and the video was already recorded. It's like, I'm just going to punch in the audio there. Full exposure.
That's
exposed.
An incredible level of integrity as a teacher, that you would admit that, and also that when you were doing your edit, you acknowledged there was a mistake and you fixed it. Like, you talking about the fourth edit, like anyone that watches my stuff, you'll know that there are no edits. I hit record on my camera and whatever happens, happens. I improvise while I'm teaching, and sometimes I improvise too much. I might do a 20-minute take, and then at the end of it, there'd be a bit of improvisation, and I absolutely screw it up. And then I'd delete the video and go again. Like that. Or I did one the other day where I was teaching, I planned to do a video really on time, teaching Toss a Coin to Your Witcher from The Witcher.
Right. Yeah.
Really like a harmonic analysis of the track. And
I was going to do the same thing.
Yeah, I did it all. And then when I was rendering it, or at least checking it back, I realized that in transcribing it all, I pitch shifted the track so I didn't have to play it with a capo, and I'd made no mention of that in the video, and I went, cool, I'll delete that, and I never remade it.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Hey, I mean, just so you know, I mean, my videos are riddled with errors. I think somebody commented the other day, like, I like how there's a mistake in every video. It's like, that's kind of there's always something, and I try to pin it on the top so people know, like, hey, I meant to say A flat and I said A. It's just, it's inevitable. It's inevitable, and like, I am so, I hate being wrong on the internet. Nobody wants to be wrong on the internet. So I do try to make it an extra point to correct those before they go out. But I've had some pretty embarrassing mistakes before where I've deleted the whole video, fixed the mistake, re-uploaded it before too many people found out. Just because I hate, like, it ruins the content of the video. I try to make my videos like a song. You start it, you end it, you enjoy the whole thing. And, when you do that, think about how much editing you would do on your own track, like on your own music track. Like, that can be hours and hours and hours of fine tuning. So it's a little tedious, and actually it's very tedious. But one day I'd like to make more of the content that you're making. It's a lot more free form and a lot more conversational. But I'm hoping that's what this will turn into.
It's fun.
Yes, it is fun, man. So here's what I wanted to ask you. How many students do you have, or like what is your philosophy on long-term students? I've had some students that took lessons with me for literally 9, 10 years, and every one of those years was productive. And
Yep.
to me, I felt like, okay, I'm no longer a music teacher. I'm a music coach. I'm just there to like help you get to the next step, to keep you motivated. I know you come back because without you coming back, nobody else is helping ignite those sparks. Nobody else is helping you with your, so I really enjoy those relationships, but it counteracts what I said before, that the job as a guitar teacher is to get people out of guitar lessons as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on that as far as like when should a student be cut free? Should they ever be cut free?
Well, yeah, okay. This is a definitely a difficult one for me to think about, because the amount of students that I've had that have been really, really long term, I stopped classing them as students. I stopped saying I'm your guitar teacher, and I
get that.
it's more mentoring. Like
Yeah.
I've had some great students that have gone on to like Berkeley and are now flying around the world doing all these amazing things in music.
Awesome.
And they'll hook up with me every now and again, and they're not really looking for help in music. They're looking for career advice. They're looking for what would you do in this situation. It feels like you shouldn't be charging for that, but fair enough. They respect your time, and that's appreciated. It's a difficult one outside of examples like that, though, because in all honesty, since I quit teaching in music schools and I went more into transcription as being my main focus of earning a living, and of course educational DVDs and YouTube and writing books, my student base has dwindled to where I want it to be. I'm in that perfect place for me now, where I don't have to teach more than, if I do 10 lessons a week, that's too busy. I want to really be able to devote. I've got a lesson in a couple of hours, and I'm really planning in my mind. It's a new student, actually, a new patron.
Oh, wow.
And I'm planning where we're going to go, because he's a slide guitar player and he plays an open E, which is an area that I'm experienced in. But I have to, listen to his musical influences, because they will differ from mine, and I have to get an idea of where he's likely to go. And when I see him in a few weeks' time, I want to remember that lesson. And when you've done 40 lessons that week, you tend to, everything kind of melds together. So, in terms of having long-term students, in all honesty, it's something that I would like to try and avoid, because of what we talked about with that idea of letting your students go out into the real world and do something in music. Having said that, though, I totally understand why students do study with teachers for long periods of time, because it becomes part of their routine, right? And it's not to say that if I didn't still study with teachers that I had when I was 20, that I wouldn't still be learning things. It's that there's a scary wealth of information out there in the world, and I don't want to just get it from one source type thing,
Yeah. Right.
So, I'm not going to say it's not for me, but I kind of like it when students go on to other teachers, because I convince myself that they've had that confidence to do that.
Exactly. To me, one of those really, really rewarding experiences is one of those students, like maybe I had them for like 4 or 5 years. I really had time to really, not only just teach them the basics, but also get into the weird stuff, get into the, the deeper guitar teacher ranty levels of like, okay, let's cut past the bullshit. Let's cut past the, the basics of like pentatonics. Let's talk about actual music. The stuff I was telling you my dad was trying to instill into me. Yeah. Okay, we've learned polyrhythms. Let's forget about polyrhythms. Okay, we learned Phrygian dominant. Let's forget all about it, because none of that stuff matters. And, with those students, I try to impart just a little bit of good taste, and then they go out and do their things. They go to college, and then when they come back, it's like, oh my goodness, I can no longer even come close to calling you a student. Now you are a colleague. Now you are a musician I know who is like introducing me to cool things that I am being inspired by equally. And it's like, how awesome is that now I have a new musician to work with. I have a new musician to like conspire with, and like I feel responsible for that slightly, to me, teaching, you can only do half the work. They have to do, all that work themselves. So, but it's just, how rewarding is that? That like you have more cool musicians to hang out with.
It's kind of like having a child, and I can't say that accurately because I don't have any children. But
there's an element of that.
Well,
you feel responsible.
I've got students that I can think of that I've taught since they were 12 years old, and they're now hitting that age where they're in the States, and they're celebrating birthdays and having their first legal beer. That's you get the opportunity to meet these people in the flesh, and you get to have your first beer with them, and that's it gets to that stage now where students, they come back from college, they want to hook up, and I'm not interested in money at that point. It's like,
Exactly.
yeah, come over. We'll sit in the studio
Yeah.
for a couple of hours. We'll catch up. We'll play some music. We'll maybe have a beer, and see where things go. Well, you're a friend now,
Yes.
rather
Yeah.
than it's that same thing, right? You're a friend now, not a cash line.
Right, right. And, I have some experience with a notorious guitar instructor who, ended up charging for everything at that point in time. Like any sort of consultation, any second on the phone, any email spent is going to be some charge. And, it helped teach me how to be a bad teacher. My experience with a notoriously bad guitar teacher taught me how not to do things. And one of my favorite things is doing exactly what you're talking about. Having these kids well, I call them kids, but they're not kids anymore.
Yeah.
They're legally and, officially adults. But coming back in and, working with music and seeing what they've improved on and, how much they learned outside of what we did and, how they bring music to me that I wouldn't have found on my own. And it's like, okay, now you are teaching me, the student has become the teacher. You're keeping me aware and abreast of like new music. You're keeping me from becoming an old fart. I really appreciate that. And it influences me. My style has absolutely been forged over the years by my students who came back to me with what they've learned and shown me what they've, learned to love. And that's changed me. It's changed me as a player. It's changed me as a composer. Those songs that they showed me where it's like, oh, wow, I've never heard this before. Oh, wow, this is brand new. I would have never heard this before unless you brought it in. So it's very valuable. It's almost a selfish thing to be a good teacher because you get so much reward back out of it. You really do.
And if you compare that to the bad teachers that we talk about, who aren't interested in expanding their musical horizons, that feel they have nothing to learn, that's not cool, man. Like, I get it. It is hard. It is really hard to listen to new music. When somebody says, you'll really like this band, finding time to do that is hard to do. But there can be so many rewards from doing that. You can find that next thing that takes you back to being a 14-year-old kid, that inspires you again to just, sit and practice for hours and hours
exactly.
And that's just never, ever going to happen with a bad teacher. You show him a new CD and he'll say, but you should check out Malmsteen's first album. It's like, shut up, dude, shut up. Malmsteen's first album's great, but Thank You Scientists are fantastic. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I brought in a Fish album to my notoriously bad guitar teacher, and there was a saxophone solo I heard. It was some horn solo, some brass, and I remember thinking, what the hell is he playing? Like, I knew what pentatonic sounded like. I knew what the blues scale sounded like. I had an idea of like harmonic minor, and I'm listening to this horn thinking like, what in God's name is going on there? So I brought it in to my guitar teacher, and the song was Reba by Fish, and it's got a really hippy-dippy chorus, bag it, tag it, sell it to the butcher at the store. It's like a nursery rhyme chorus. And he does a face palm, and he looks up at me and says, I can't believe anybody would listen to this music. And then he just does some hand-waving woo-woo about he's using lots of notes. Like, first off, completely, shat on the song, completely disregarded my interest for it, and then didn't even give me an answer, so it's like, that kind of stuff is remarkable that it exists,
Let's be realistic here, right?
Lesson.
Let's be super realistic. The reason he did that is because he didn't know an answer. He couldn't give you an answer. And that's that same thing, right? As a teacher, you might find yourself in situations where you don't have an answer, but you either have one of two things: the musical skills to work out the answer, or the confidence in your ability to say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure we can find somebody that does. That I think if anything, that adds more gravitas to your integrity as a teacher, rather than your ability as a teacher. Being able to demonstrate that you're not willing to lie to a student I think that's a great thing to do. And many teachers, they won't do that. They'll just you don't want to learn that. That's wasting your time.
Any human being who has looked at themselves, honestly, knows that you're just going to make mistake after mistake after mistake. Anybody who's hit that dive bomb at the Dunning-Kruger effect, you go up the hill, you think you're great shit, hot shit, and then you finally crash to rock bottom. Anybody who's hit that rock bottom knows that like mistakes are part of the game, and you're going to be wrong, and you're going to be wrong a lot. And to cover that up, to conceal that, to hide that is not helpful for anyone. It's not helpful for your ego. It's not helpful for your students learning. And it's one of the things I absolutely look for is people that are willing to admit their mistakes instead of just doubling down on their mistakes.
You have to
I'm sorry, that's not the way the world works. People aren't correct all the time. People are constantly wrong, all right? The human brain is a flawed organ. It is not a supercomputer,
The really important thing to consider there, I took this from someone just recently, that feeling of being wrong You have to ask someone, what does it feel like to be wrong? And they'll initially say it doesn't feel good to be wrong, and they're incorrect when they say that. It feels exactly the same to be wrong as it feels to be right, because you don't know. You don't know that you're wrong about something.
Yeah.
And it's hard to acknowledge that you might be wrong about something and just not know it. You'll think you're right, and it feels exactly
Right.
the same. Exactly the same. Acknowledge that there is a whole world of information out there, of things to learn. And being wrong about things is great, because it means you can learn. There's still things to learn.
Yes,
You can
exactly.
better yourself still, rather than
Every
hide.
time you realize you're wrong, it means, okay, you just learned something. And, if you stop realizing you're wrong, it means you stop learning things. It's really simple. Like, you cannot progress unless you're constantly failing. You cannot progress unless you're constantly being proven wrong. That's what forges the right path.
Yeah.
And I'm going to live by that and die by that, because it's worked for my life at this point. And I see the people that don't live that way, and I want nothing to be like them at all. Like, it's a horrifying existence. The people that walk around, belligerently right 100% about everything they do, and they just stop learning. They have found there's that invisible wall they can't pass, because they think that they figured it all out, and it's all a conspiracy why it's not working. It's all a conspiracy that I can't play, or that this didn't work out. No, it's because you didn't learn. It's because you stopped improving because you thought you had everything figured out.
I'll throw one last example of a bad teacher at you. I say last.
Sure.
He might inspire me to come up with another one. This is a bad teacher, right? So when I was at music school, when we were learning, or being taught, modes of melodic minor, modes of harmonic minor, etc., when it got to mode 7 of harmonic minor, this was actually an ear training class. When it got to mode 7 of harmonic minor, our textbooks and the thing that our teacher told us this scale was called was Mixolydian sharp 1. How? Right? And if you sit down and you do the math, it's correct, right? It's correct in terms of the interval structure, but a scale can't have a sharp 1. It simply cannot have a sharp. Imagine that in an ear training test, right? They play the scale and go, what scale was that? And you go, well, okay, so it was the root. And they're like, did you miss the sharp 1? What? That's a bad teacher. A teacher that for years has taught that in a school and never gone, hang on a minute.
You're right.
I appreciate that this is the easiest way to teach this, but it's not correct.
I have never, ever in my life heard of Mixolydian sharp 1. That's pretty fantastic.
Well,
I do know that one of my students in high school came back from his high school music theory class and was arguing with me that he goes, no, my music theory teacher says that the diatonic 5 chord in minor is a major chord. And I go, what do you mean? He's like, well, he said it's diatonic to the minor. And I'm like, we can prove that it's not. We can prove it's not in the scale. And it's this, I guess there's this old archaic, and I don't have a degree, so I guess there's this archaic way of looking at key that, like, the 5 chord, the dominant chord, since it's so commonly used in minor keys, is the 5 chord.
Yeah.
But, like, it's like, we're talking about diatonic. The word diatonic means within a scale.
Yeah.
So why can you call, like, you're not even using the words right at that point in time. So, like, how do you argue with a music theory professor when it's just, like, why do these rules exist? That's a whole different.
Here's a wonderful
I
one
think
for
the
you.
teacher would at least tell him both sides of the story instead of just saying nope. And I try to explain to him both sides of the story.
But the
It's
problem is
diatonically minor.
The teacher
but,
probably
we make
didn't
it
know.
major.
The teacher probably just accepted that as true. I was dealing with one guy, I was referencing scales, and I referenced the harmonic major scale. And he said, whoa, hang on a minute. There's no such thing as the harmonic major scale. I went, what do you mean there's no such thing as the harmonic major scale? He said, you can't raise the 7th in a major scale. And I'm like, have you ever considered why the harmonic minor scale is called harmonic minor? It's not because you raise you do it for harmony. It's for the sake of harmony. Harmonic doesn't mean raised 7th. And this guy adamant still, probably to this day, adamant that the harmonic major scale doesn't exist, that isn't a thing.
Yeah.
Not willing to learn, just unwilling to learn.
Right. Well, I mean, you having a YouTube channel, I'm sure you've gotten comments that just boggle your mind with their incorrectness. Then you think, how in the world did somebody teach you this incorrectly that you're going to come in and argue with me on something so basic as that? Just it's really remarkable. But that's what happens. You learn something once, you think you're correct, and you planted your flag. I've got to defend my flag now till the day I die. And thus is born a shitty musician who never improves.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you. Have you ever had to, like, get rid of a student? Like, have you ever had that student where it's just like, for whatever reason, it's not necessarily a bad teacher. It's like, okay, this student is, for whatever reason, I either cannot teach them or I refuse to teach them. It's an extremely rare case for me, but I'm just curious. You've got a lot of teaching experience, so do I. I'm curious if you ever ran into anything like that.
Definitely. So you referenced the student that got caught smoking weed, and that was the thing that inspired her to start taking music seriously. I had a student that had no interest in learning. they were there because their parents, or I say I had a student, I have had many students like that, but this one particular student, she did not want to be there. And that was made apparent to me. And that was the first time I really confronted the idea that when you're teaching kids, often half of your job is being a babysitter rather than being a teacher.
Right.
And it got to the stage after several weeks of lessons, it's happened a couple of times actually, where I've had to say to the parents, look, I don't want to mess you around here, but you're just wasting your money at this stage. Like you are getting nothing out of this other than a babysitting service, and it's starting to make me look bad as a teacher.
Right.
So that's the line for me. When other people could look in and go, oh, that kid's been playing guitar for almost a year now, and they can't even play a chord, or they can't even play a melody. She can't even hold a pick correctly. Like at that stage, you have to be like, I need to.
Right.
It's not that your child isn't into music. It's more like there is a passion. Everybody has a passion for something, and this just isn't the passion for them. Go out and find another passion. There will be something that will grab your kid's imagination. I hate, to me, I guess that's also a bad teacher, right? Someone that is trying to force music as that passion. My job is to inspire you, but to inspire you with your inner flame, if you like. If it's not there, then cool. Like, enjoy music as much as you like, but I'm not going to force you to play music. So I have had to get rid of students over the years. It sucks when you have to do it, but that's been the only reason I think. Ever. I certainly have known I've known teacher friends of mine that have had to get rid of students because students think it's okay to turn up to lessons with like a 6-pack of beer and not. Oh yeah, and it's.
Yeah, we're not hanging out.
Yeah, we're here to work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I would agree with you in that sense that it does make you look bad as a teacher when you've got a student that's been hanging around for that long and has accomplished nothing. When I started teaching in high school, and it was my only source of income when I started teaching. 17, 18 years old, that and gigging, and I had this mentality of let's hold on to every single student possible because this is my job. I don't even care if I don't like them. I don't care if they're not practicing. Let's do our best to keep them coming in because they enjoy it, or they're learning or something, or their parents think it's worth the time. Whatever it took to keep a student. So that was my mentality when I started, and I was able to keep my schedule packed. But as time goes on, and you start realizing, as your schedule might get busy or something like that, I had much less patience for people who were literally just there because their parent, the drive-by lesson, I called it. The parents drive by, dump the kid out by this, and I had it was near the, because I did just really, really close out most of my teaching schedule. I've been teaching consistently since 2004, and it wasn't until maybe 6 months ago that I was like, we're funneling things down to a very, very select few of, very, very small group of people, and I'm not charging them. It's just whenever it works out, it works out.
Yeah.
But up until that point, a few years before that, I started coming into that point. It's like, okay, this is just a waste of my time. I can't. Kids that are texting in lessons, kids that are texting, that are not listening to you, they're not practicing, they think they know more than you do. And I had one adult who was really, really excited. He went out and bought the guitar, and he's all excited about it. And I had to fire him as a student after like 3 months because he just thought everything was wrong with my teaching, and the solution was some trick. Well, I Googled that if I use a capo, these chords will be easier. Well, I Googled that, I'm using the wrong pick, and maybe are my strings too thick? Well, I tried what you're doing, and it's just too hard. It shouldn't feel that hard. And the guy just wouldn't practice. He thought everything was a conspiracy. Once again, it can't be that I have to practice. It can't be that I have to work. It must be that, you know what? I need a new guitar. Oh, you know what? I need a footstool. That'll make it easier. It's like, dude, you just got to play your C chord for 8 hours, all right? Yeah. That's how you're going to get your C chord to ring out.
The example I always give students is, I remember being like 14 and trying to learn Breakout by the Foo Fighters, and I got a tab off of mxtabs.net for those old school internet guys, and there was a G chord in there, and I looked at the tab and forced my fingers down with my right hand in the right place, and I was like, nope, tab must be wrong.
Yep. For me, that was Nothing Else Matters. There's a stretch in the beginning of Nothing Else Matters. It's like the 5th fret to the 2nd fret. Your first finger's playing an F sharp, and your ring finger's over there on the 5th frets on the other string. I remember thinking that's a mistake. Yeah. Your hand can't do that. And so for the longest time, I just bullshitted it. And finally, I ended up getting my the stretch in there.
I do have one other student actually that I dropped. This just occurred to me when you were saying that, because the one you're talking about there, where he's always looking for a shortcut, I feel that's like a personality thing, right? That's he doesn't respect you. Yes. And I have run into that. I did have to drop one student several years ago because nice guy, like genuinely very nice guy. And then one day out of the blue, I just got I got a message or an email from him saying, Levi, this is really important. Just so you know, it's not too late for you to turn things around. It's not too late for you to be saved. And then
Oh boy.
you know where this is going. I just got
Oh boy.
pages and pages of all this like nuts religious propaganda, and I was just like, this relationship's over, man. Like, you're free to your beliefs, but that's not what we're here for. I'm here to teach you. You're not here to teach me.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Well, you're totally right that it's a personality thing. I actually worked with this person, and it describes a lot of, this is in my manufacturing career, and it described a lot of his work mentality. You know, instead of actually doing the work to fix a problem, he would try to organize a meeting to discuss the problem, to come up with a thing that could prevent the problem from ever happening. Instead of just doing the 45 minutes of work to fix the problem, let's do 3 hours of planning and prep, that kind of person. And it was so funny to see that same mentality go from work directly into guitar lessons, where I just had to stop. It's like, I cannot teach you because you cannot learn. You think everything is a conspiracy against you.
Yeah,
it's remarkable.
Hey,
one of the other things I wanted to talk about is talented students and how much that ends up screwing people over in the long run. Because one of the students that I had, young kid that really didn't respect me, and I really don't care if people, I don't demand respect. It would be nice to have it, but if you're going to pay me, you don't need to, whatever. You don't respect me. You're a high school kid. I get it. You think you're right all the time.
Yeah.
If you're an adult, it's a whole different story. It's but the kid's 16, 17, extremely talented. He was writing his own songs, didn't know a lick of music theory, but he was improvising. He figured out a way to sound good, and he was, slapping his guitar and writing chord progressions and writing songs, but he would not learn from me.
Yeah.
He signed up for lessons, and he wouldn't learn from me. And every bit of advice I gave him, he didn't take it. And it was just remarkable. I mean, I had to cut him free after a little while because, we did some recording and production. I helped him record and produce his own songs, which, once again, he knew all the answers to. And, once he tried making his bass line, he realized, I don't know how to write a bass line. So I had to write his bass line for him. And then when he needed a keyboard line, he didn't know how to write. So I had to do that for him. But still, it's all his responsibility afterward.
Yeah.
And he still hasn't learned. He still hasn't practiced.
Yeah.
He's still surviving on the same 2-chord change. He discovered major 1 to a major 4 that's like a major 7.
Yeah.
So, E major to A major 7. Every single one of his songs is 1 to 4, 1 to 4. Yeah. He doesn't realize that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
So, it's no improvement over the last 6 years just because, he was so freaking talented. It all came so easy to him that as soon as the going became tough, it's well, nope, that can't be right. I must just keep going on my talented way.
Yeah.
So you guys experience with that kind of thing?
I was that kid for a while. I absolutely was that kid for a while. Not. It will come as.
When did you get crushed then? When did the Dunning-Kruger curve start going down? When did you finally realize?
When I moved out of a small town and went from living in a county in the on the east coast of England and then moved to the big city of London.
Yeah.
And you suddenly realise actually you don't know nearly as much as you thought you did. I wish I could go back in time and apologise to many people that I dealt with in my youth because I thought I knew best. I've been that guy that's turned up to guitar lessons and has sat down with a guitar teacher, and my only reason for being there was for them to tell me how good I was. And
oh wow,
and when you don't get that, you're like, oh, that guy sucked. And actually looking back, you're like, well, I was just a snotty-nosed teenager, and I thought I knew best, and I missed a good learning opportunity there. But that's the world works like that, right? I've had many students like that myself, and there are people out there like that. And I guess all you can hope for in scenarios like that is that you can help them see the light, if you like, not with the don't send the propaganda out and stuff like that. That never works. But you hope that you can bring them down to earth a little bit, because I have had incredibly talented students who went down that path a little bit and tried to rely on it a little bit, but then eventually sort of leveled out and realized, you know what, I need to really take this stuff seriously. And they've become incredible, genuinely incredible players. And then I have had the students that you just look at and you're like, man, I wish guitar came as easy to me as it evidently has to you. But then after 6 months of working with them and you look at their situation, you're like, you're still the same player you were 6 months ago. And I'm pretty much the same player that I was 6 months ago, but I've been playing for more of my life than I haven't been playing for now. So you'd expect very little progress at this stage. It's tiny progress. But when you're 16 years old you should be seeing tons of progress. Like
Yes.
every single week, you should something should be happening in your playing, because those are the most creative and explosive periods in your life in terms of learning, or at least in my experience. So I'll be honest, it's dealing with when you find someone that is talented, it's a daunting process, because it will go
Yeah.
one of two ways, and one of them is really hard to deal with. So, yeah.
Right. I've been very fortunate to have like at least two really talented students that also had their head on straight with their ego and were able to just troop through it. For whatever reason, they still had a work ethic and they were able to just go through it. And those I can't call them students anymore. Like, these are the colleagues I'm telling you about.
Yeah.
Remarkable musicians, and it's just incredible to see. But I would say for the most part, my least talented students end up doing the best in the long term. I remember I had a kid who shares my name, Jake. I don't mind saying his name because I told him this to his face after he had taken lessons with me for 5 years. And as he's going to college, I said, Jake, you are not talented. You are one of the least talented students as I've ever had. And that is why you're going to do so much better than everyone else that picks up this instrument, because you understand work. You understand, do the task, take the advice, test it, retest it, practice it. And that is going to take you everywhere farther that every talented person fails. Because when talented people fail, they blame the world. They don't understand that the answer is more work. And I had that relationship with him where I could tell him, dude, you don't have it. But, in my opinion, neither did I. I wasn't talented. The only talent I had was this ability to get hooked on it. That was my talent. Is like, I just got obsessed. And the fact that I was able to get obsessed meant that I was able to get good at guitar. But I don't have perfect pitch. I couldn't sing anything. I couldn't improvise. I couldn't write music. All of that stuff came from learning and practicing. All of it.
Yeah.
All of my ear, all of my compositional skills. So I really consider myself the poster child for, using theory to learn to write, as opposed to saying, theory is going to limit your writing. Because I couldn't write anything. Literally, I couldn't. I thought it was magic. I thought it was like, you're supposed to just feel it. It's supposed to pour out of your heart and soul, and then the notes come out onto the page. Like, I couldn't do that. Sorry. Like, I didn't have that built into me. Some people do, and I couldn't. But then I learned some diatonic chords, and I learned some scales, and oh, cool, I wrote a solo. Oh, cool, I wrote a sing-along. So, oh, cool, I wrote a thing in Lydia. And that started growing, and I was able to throw away all that theory and be like, hey, I can write what I want to write and not think about what it is, because I'm just comfortable with it now.
Yeah.
So, that's
and
what
not worried
not being
about
talented
justifying
does.
it. You're not worried about explaining why it works.
Right.
At that point, because these are all just subconscious things. I always,
Yeah.
when I'm talking either on streams or in lessons, I always go through this long old I'm communicating with you now and I'm doing it freely. I'm not creating these words as I'm going, but I've studied the language. I know how the language works, but I'm freely expressing myself by using words. It's not as fluently as I'd like to now, apparently, but you get what I'm saying. We learn all of the rules, and then you get to the stage where it's just completely automatic. So yeah,
that is the goal. Learn the rules and then forget you ever learned them. But if to me, it's just been invaluable. Especially if you're not a talented person, you got to learn those rules, because that's what got me into the whole business. I would have been screwed. I would have been sitting there in 6th grade, sitting there with my bell, thinking, okay, I don't learn. I'll never be a musician. But just by learning some of those rules gave me the confidence. It gave me some basic tools to start expressing myself musically. And then from there, the more I learned, the more I was able to express myself and forget those rules. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I think you already get it. That same kind of thing. You shouldn't be composing with that stuff in the forefront of your mind, but damn, does it help. It really helps to have as a backup when you're out of ideas or you're not inspired, or you're trying to do something like write a harmony. It's pretty nice to have all those rules.
You'll often be told, at least in the work world, work smart, not hard, right? And that will get you sort of halfway. But I think when you talk about your student Jake, to me, it's that combination of knowing that if you really want to get where you want to be, it's a combination of both working smart and hard. The smartness can't be underestimated. The student that is talented, the one that has technical ability or has perfect pitch or whatever it happens to be, they tend to get sucked into that technical world of playing. And as I said, right at the start of this conversation, for me, everything now is about musicality. And I put emphasis on the word now there, because that never used to be there. The musicality wasn't something that was important. But when I was at music school at university, I was surrounded by some very, very talented musicians. And there were some players there that weren't so good, that probably shouldn't have been there. But it became very, very apparent that if I'm going to succeed in this industry, I need to be smart about what I go into, and I need to accept the fact that I can try and go into a technique arms race with this ridiculous player, but you're never going to achieve it, and you're never going to win that battle. And more importantly, even if you do, you're going to check the internet, and there's going to be a 6-year-old Asian kid that's better than both of you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you
You're
have
never
to be
going to keep up on that.
smart. And when I like transcription, obviously I keep mentioning it. When I realised that there was potential in that, it was like, well, that's a smart option to go down to. It's not
Right.
glamorous, but it's smart because there's less competition. When I was asked if I wanted to write books, and the publisher said to me, we were thinking of country books. I love country music, don't get me wrong, but I certainly didn't consider it my main area of expertise. And yeah, they pointed out to me that, look, stats show it's the most popular genre of music in the world. I still don't know if I agree with that. But also it's underrepresented in terms of publications out there. So it's a smart thing to do. And it's like, okay, let's work smart and let's work hard. Talent shouldn't necessarily come into it, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I would agree. One of the nice things about being a teacher to me is that it is less competitive than being just a player. You know, if I decided, hey, I'm going to be the best player in the world, oh my goodness, that's so much work. Like, I had that dream for a few years, and thank God I got rid of that dream. That dream is just not for me. It's for somebody else, and I admire them. Godspeed. Best of luck. I wish you all the power in the world to become the best player, but I am not going to pursue that. It is too difficult of a task to achieve, and it's immediately going to be replaced by somebody else.
Yeah.
And by saying I want to be a really good teacher, I feel like the competition field is much lower. You know, in my experience working at a music shop and being around music teachers, I didn't see a lot of people that wanted to be good teachers. I saw a lot of people that just wanted full schedules, and those are two different things.
Yeah.
And you know, with the advent of YouTube and being able to put yourself out there, it's like a miracle that I can actually pursue being a good teacher and actually, you know, make some sort of a living off of it at the same time. But that is, like, to me, a smarter thing to do, as opposed to saying, you know, I'm going to try to be the best player, or I'm going to, you know, start a band and we're going to make it. We're going to actually, you know, pay the bills with our tour. Like, you know, I admire that stuff, but, you know, it's not, you know, you think, look at your field of competition. You and everybody else is trying to do that same thing. So trying to look at things realistically, I think, is a very helpful thing that hopefully a teacher provides you some insight in. You don't want to crush their dreams, but you want to give them an idea of what's realistic, you know, economically, what is the landscape out there. And like you said, if you don't come up from money, which I certainly don't, you have to think about things like, you know, okay, is this going to be able to pay my bills? Or, you know, I mean, some people could just call up their parents and, you know, everything's taken care of, you know, the rent and everything. You know, that's not the case all the time. So, you know, you have to think about those things as a musician, is how is this actually going to function for you?
Let me throw a controversial question at you then.
Sure.
So where do you stand on the subject of teaching reading?
Teaching sight reading.
Yes.
I don't teach sight reading to most students unless they are under a certain age. If they are like in middle school, and if they're like 6th grade or 5th grade, and I don't even take most students. I had like 8 years or over is what I used to start teaching at. That's what I eventually changed, because the fingers are too small underneath that. They didn't have the attention span. And I did have some 8-year-old students that actually worked out really good. So it was kind of a case-by-case basis. But if they're at that age, I feel like I'd be a failure of a teacher to not teach them basic sight reading, because they're going to go in a band. Their parents are going to put them in band. Parents are going to put them in you know, give them a clarinet. And I want them to be like, oh, I take lessons with Jake, and I know the C. I want them to have that benefit as a music student with me, that I am helping enrich their lives outside of that. But I only go through like the very, very, very basics of sight reading so they can develop the skills to interpret it. I do not teach any of my adult students how to sight read unless they specifically ask for it, because 99% of the music that I am confronted with as a guitar player in the year 2020 is not notated in sheet music.
Yep.
So why should we spend hours and hours and weeks and hundreds of dollars learning a skill that is only practical or applicable less than 1% of your time as a musician?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's my thought.
Like, yeah, so like, I'm not going to say bad guitar teacher, but it's that same principle of, if you have a guitar teacher that seems to be teaching you things because these things take a long time, that's probably a warning sign. Sight reading is definitely a skill, or reading skills. There is, I always say there's a difference between sight reading and reading skills.
Right.
But for me, it's so easy to teach, you know, sight reading to a student, and it will take years. And that's great if you want to make some money. But if you're being honest with yourself as a teacher, I think that we can all acknowledge that every single minute that you spend sight reading could be better spent somewhere else. Every single minute could be better spent training your ear.
Yeah.
Like, so I was transcribing some Paul Gilbert songs with a student today. None of his harder instrumental stuff. I'm talking like the Spaceship One era pop rock stuff.
Okay.
Looking at songs like Mr. Spock is a great tune. Some lovely chord changes in there. And now with more musical experience, I listen to it and I go, okay, it's Paul Gilbert, but it's not. This is basically a Beatles song. That's what's going on here, because my ear understands that now. Now I'm at that stage where I'm working on this with students, and I'm like, isn't it really cool that he played like a secondary dominant chord there, but it's in first inversion, and the student sort of is starting to pick these up. We initially call them money chords or ear twisters, anything that happens that you go, oh, what was that? And I think every second that you spend learning to sight read and is a second less on something like that, being able to hear something and go, oh, that was a minor 7 flat 5 chord, where is that? Let me find that. Because I should have known this stuff. I learned to play almost all of that album when it came out in 2006 or a little bit before then. But the nuance of it, the things that actually matter, they were way over my head.
Right.
The harmony, the songs, the strumming,
100% agreement. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a valuable skill, but for what we're doing, I mean, let's face it, we're on the guitar. We're not on the piano. You're not going to be downloading all your stuff. I mean, like, it's a different world, and to treat all the instruments the same is completely pointless. To say, this is the way they taught piano, 100 years ago, this is the way you need to teach guitar in the year 2020 is complete nonsense. I don't subscribe to it. And I did subscribe to it when I started teaching because I thought that's what I'm supposed to do. And fortunately, I learned in this world, and many people of our age, and we're similar age. I'm 33. You've got about I'm quite older than you. You're about 26, right?
No, I'm 32.
32.
31.
I thought you were younger.
31.
31.
Maybe.
So maybe I was watching one of your older videos when you mentioned your age or something like that. But our generation, I feel, has got that a little bit better figured out.
Yeah, I'm not anti-reading. Let me be clear on that. Like, some of my students have to learn to read because, funnily enough, a lot of students come to me because they want to transcribe. That's what the skill that they want to learn from me. And when I say to them, well, let's be realistic here. If you want to listen to something and write it down, you damn sure better be able to see something written down and know what that's going to sound like. Like, those two things are very closely linked. So there are certain people that I'll absolutely be working on reading with, but again, we're looking for bad teachers. A bad teacher is somebody that gives you a skill that you don't need because it means that they can drag out those lessons. And
the worst part is they gave you that skill in lieu of more practical skills. They could have been working like what you were saying, training your ear in those cases. I just feel like it's one of the greatest things about the generational shift is, I think, this idea of like, okay, just because things weren't that way, they used to be that way doesn't mean we need to continue doing it that way. And I do see a lot more of that in teaching. I do see a lot more of that in, the YouTube environment. And hopefully it catches on because, I'm sure that your videos, my videos, I mean, people are paying attention to these. I'm sure that actual teachers are seeing these things. When I say actual teachers, I mean academic teachers. Eventually the tide has to change. And I think it's going to change because it's effective, because people are realizing, wow, people are really learning more from these YouTube videos on guitar than they are from college classes on music theory.
And more importantly, today Rick Beato is giving a speech at Berkeley. I know that's the type of thing that Adam Neely does. They reach huge amounts of people. You reach huge amounts of people. I reach a lot of people. But let's say, for argument's sake, that only 2 people have ever seen my videos, and the same with you. That's still more people than the idea started with. You've still spread it out more. Exactly. And those 2 people, if they can tell 2 more people, inspire 2 more people, and stop this kind of super old-fashioned way, uninspired way of teaching, then things are only ever going to change. And fortunately, it's more than 2 people. We're spreading our ideas to tens of thousands of people, hundreds in your case.
Okay, so you asked me a controversial question on the music staff, and this gets into a territory which I'm legitimately afraid to talk about. All right, because I get eaten up for this, even just privately amongst my friends and my students. The circle of fifths is not a topic I spend a single moment on with my students, because for one reason alone. Yes, it's cool. It's filled with cool relationships. Yes, you can study it all day long. You can see these cool things, and it can help you figure this out, and you can help you figure that. But I have never once been benefited by my circle of fifths. I have never written a better song because of my circle of fifths. I have never written a cooler chord change because of my circle of fifths. I have never thought, what if I consult my circle of fifths? How will this? It's never been practical to me as somebody who isn't I don't know. I just don't get it. I mean, it's helpful to find the key signature. Yeah, if you're not familiar with key signatures, but I'm sure you're at the point where the key signatures are ingrained. You're not counting through the you know how many sharps are in D. You know how many flats are in F. Like, this is stuff you just know because you transcribe all the time.
Yeah.
So why am I a bad teacher? Honest answer here. Am I a bad teacher for never teaching the circle of fifths unless they ask about it?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love this question, and it actually makes me wonder why we're even having this conversation. Because generally speaking, I think the reason conversations like this work is because you have people with differing ideas. It's no good when you're essentially talking to a mirror, because I'm in complete agreement with you. I'm in 100% agreement with you.
Yes!
And it's, you know what, that could maybe be out of complete ignorance. I would say I'm pretty well versed in music and music theory, and there are lots of subjects that exist objectively. The circle of fifths exists, but I am yet to sit down with any of my peers and have them explain to me a reason why it matters, a reason like the benefit that I'd get out of it. It just hasn't been a thing for me, unless you're doing classical harmony, which is something that I haven't done. I've not done Baroque counterpoint since high school. Like, it's not been relevant.
I've never had to, and I won't learn it unless I have to. Really.
Yeah. I'll throw one back at you then. Solfege.
Okay. Well, oh boy, do I teach it? No, but do I admire it and value it? Yeah. I mean, I have taught it in certain instances because I think movable do is a great concept. I think, understand if you're talking about the actual rules of solfege, like do, re, ra, and so I don't teach that specifically. I do teach the idea of movable do just using intervals. Like, I want people to be able to audiate and vocalize all of the 12 intervals. That to me is extremely important with those students that at least get to that point. But do I teach it in the traditional sense? No, I just tell them that that's what it is.
Yes.
This is the way it's supposed to happen. What we're going to do is 1, 2, 3, flat 3. That's what we're going to do. We don't need to learn.
We're mirroring again. Because, like the classic solfege system, it's that, I'm not going to say it's a bad system or that it's something that you shouldn't teach, but it's that same mentality of the people that teach this are very dogmatic about it. And that I do find issue with, because my method of doing things is, what is do? What is re? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It could be fish, chips, pie. It doesn't matter, right? So why not do it with something that actually means something? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like that, to me, makes sense. And when I ask that question to people in that position, they can't give me an answer other than tradition.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
That's not a good enough answer.
I think as teachers... So here's a really interesting one. Have you read Ted Green's... one of my favourite books is his single note soloing books?
I have not.
Okay, great books. And in it, honestly, some of the best books that you'll look at on lines and vocabulary.
I'm going to actually say it for me one more time so I can...
Ted Green's single note soloing.
Okay.
People always talk about his chord chemistry book, but I think that's garbage. But single note soloing, the 1 and 2, are some of the best books. In there, he just throws out the boys' club. Like, he teaches mixolydian, right? Teaches dominant chords, teaches voicings for 9s, 11s, 13s, and everything in between, right? And then it comes to what you play over there, and at no point in this chunk of text does he use the word mixolydian. He says the dominant scale. And I love it. I love it because... I know what mixolydian means, right?
Right.
But in order for that to mean something, I have to have the Rosetta Stone of knowledge, if you know what I mean. I have to know what mixolydian means and translate it into something that means something to me. Whereas when Ted says the dominant scale, that scale that spells out a dominant chord, that to me is just like so progressive. And it's not a new book, this has been around for decades. That's what I'm really looking for in a good teacher, someone that is willing to buck tradition do something a little bit more progressive, because what they're saying objectively makes a lot more sense. I don't think of my scales in terms of linear things anymore. To me, like the dominant, when I say to a student, what does the mixolydian scale sound like? And they play me this linear thing, I'm like, no, but what does it sound like? What I'm really looking for them to do is play a dominant 13 chord, because that's that scale presented in an intervallic structure. That tells me what it sounds like. So when you say Lydian to me, I just see major 13 sharp 11. Like in my mind, that's what that means. And any scale, I've just got a translated chord form of it, because then immediately I know what this sounds like. Locrian natural 2?
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
That minor major 9 sound. Beautiful. Yeah, got it.
And that's, I feel like what I don't want to pick on music majors, and I can't because I don't have a music degree, but I'm only speaking through the people that I've seen come out of that system. They seem to only really focus on the mechanics and the numbers and the memorization, and it's a flat at third, and it's a the mixolydian has the flat sound, but they're missing out on what it feels like. They're missing out on what it sounds like, how it affects them as a listener, which is the only thing that matters. If you are an artist who's creating music, the only thing that matters at the end of the day is how does it sound? And how do people feel when they hear it? So if all of your studies are focused on, what, how many notes, what's the name of it, and if none of your studies are focused on how is this affecting us as a listener, which is abstract, and I know it's subjective, and for everybody it's going to be different, but that to me is what it's all about. And it's astonishing to me that I have comments from people that say they claim to have gone to music school, and they claim that my videos are more helpful than what they're learning from at music school. And I find that hard to believe because I am, I don't want to elevate myself above an academic professor with my amateur Google knowledge of music theory. But hey, if I'm describing it in a way that's affecting people in a more clear way, it's like, what the hell is happening in these colleges where somebody paid $60,000 and they still don't know how to make a 4-chord progression, or they don't understand that if you make the minor chord or the 4-chord minor, you can get a little heart set, get a little heart pulling of like, come on, that's basic stuff. That's like one of the first things I learned is like borrow the 4-chord. Yeah. Now you've got a love song. Now you just broke their hearts. And it's like they didn't express that to you in your $60,000 music class.
Well, Jake, allow me to. I did do a music degree, and allow me to demonstrate that your videos are more useful than music school with just 3 words, with that classic callback of mixolydian sharp 1.
Well, I appreciate that.
To me, everything you said there is right. Like, it's intangible how music affects people emotionally, and the ultimate skill is teaching how to express yourself with music, and teaching the skill to be able to react to that, to listen and react. That's what musicians, at least my ethos in music, is to teach people to be better listeners and to be able to adapt and react to the things that they're hearing, rather than being that, I can play my scale really fast because it's a muscle memory type thing like that.
Yes.
Some people are really into that. Let me be super clear. There's nothing, if that's what you're into, I totally admire that. The guys that are really into technique and pushing technical boundaries, it's in the same way that some people are into athletics. Like, there's nothing wrong with athletics.
Right.
Do you want to watch someone dance, or do you want to watch someone run the 100 meters? They're two very different things, and they're both totally valid forms of expression or competition, however you want to look at it. For me, the thing I'm interested in is that emotional connection, ear training, listen, adapt to the thing that's happened, adjust what you're doing for the setting. So they're never teaching that in music school. They're never teaching that in music school. Schools are about ticking boxes. Schools are about, has this person satisfied our tick boxes in order to say that we're willing to give them the qualification? And that's
right. And so you develop, educational stuff, and you teach as well. And I'm trying to develop my own course. I'm trying to develop like a nice, huge, giant music theory course. And I want to make sure that it covers all those bases of like, hey, I'm teaching this my way. And if you take this to a music theory professor, he's going to fail you because, I'm not teaching it the way, I don't care if you call it, I don't care if you call it a double flat or a double, we don't have to call it a double sharp. We can keep our enharmonics sloppy because the only place that matters is if you're notating it for an orchestra or if you're trying to pass tests, which is what we're not trying to do in this course. So it's been funny trying to kind of thread that needle of like, I need to teach things the way I want to teach them. I need to teach things the way that they make sense to me. But I also I feel an obligation to respect this archaic tradition enough to make sure the student doesn't go out in the real world and get made fun of, for you think it's a sharp, it's a you can't. There's no A sharp major scale, that's what elitist snobs are going to say. They're going to instantly dismiss you because you called it by the wrong enharmonic equivalent. And I just can't, but I have to do both those. I have to prepare them for the real world, and I have to teach it my way. And it's a really difficult task, I've learned.
Well, that's the thing though. Like, as a teacher, you acknowledge the way that you would prefer to do it, and the way that it was done or is more traditionally done. Both of those can be mentioned, and you have enough of an understanding to be able to explain why you're choosing to do it a certain way. To me, that's the most important thing of all. Like, my transcriptions, I don't spend a single second looking at enharmonics in them unless I know it's necessary, because if the client can't read music, why am I worried about what the notation says? I'm going to make sure all the rhythmic notation is spot on, but the enharmonics mean nothing to them, so let's not make this a 10-hour job instead of a 5-hour job type thing.
Yes.
But On the flip side, a lot of my transcription students that come to me on Patreon when they've tried to learn to transcribe a little bit, and they'll submit these transcriptions to me to review and give them feedback on, you just look at them and you understand immediately they have no concept of how to write music out, how rhythms are written out, and how notes are beamed together, etc. And that is important. But here's the key thing. I can explain to them where they've gone wrong, why they've gone wrong, and why we do it the way we do it. And that's what it all comes down to, right? If as a teacher, you should be able to explain to your student why you're doing the thing that you're doing, reassure them, and then what they'll find is they'll go out in the musical world, they'll do their thing, and hopefully, if you're a good teacher, everything that you've taught them will be confirmed.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, it's remarkable that you and I are both experienced teachers. We're both, I'd say, successful teachers, and it's remarkable that we are agreeing to disagree with all of academia. Well, not all of it, but we are agreeing that this is nonsense. We're agreeing that this is stupid. So, I mean, it still begs the question, why are we still doing it? And why is it still tradition? And should we even care anymore at this point? But, I mean, it's really refreshing to me to hear. It's validating to know that, these aren't just my crazy thoughts, that, you really feel the same way about a lot of these topics.
We're definitely
their
changing
applicability.
It. We're definitely changing it. And I say we, like you and I are at the forefront of it. This has been something that's gradually been being changed since, ever since GIT was set up in LA back in the 70s. That started because they wanted to make a change in the way that music was taught. And the work that was done by guys like Howard Roberts and Don Mock and Les Wise and all the guys that were there in those early days went on to influence generations of teachers that would then come in and spread their message and change things for the better. And then a lot of that got imported over to the UK when we had the Guitar Institute was set up over here, a different school, but technically a very similar name. We have lots of prodigious teachers over here, guys like Sean Baxter and Phil Hilborn. They revolutionised the way that education happened over here. And I think actually it's easy for us to look at it and say, academia, terrible, boo, boo, boo. But actually, if you go back and think what existed before that, if I reference something like Bert Whedon's Play in a Day book, or when you reference the Mel Bay method, these are outdated and largely accepted as being outdated. So while we are not, we haven't started this change, we're continuing to push and make things go in the direction that we know as experienced teachers is the right way for things to go. Keep spreading that word.
Okay, happily. And I mean, one little side point on this whole thing. I heard somebody talk about some. I haven't watched Rick Beato's got so many videos. Oh, yeah. I haven't watched even a fraction of them. But I guess he refers to. He's kind of made up his own name for certain kinds of triads. I think he calls like a root and an augmented fourth and a fifth. I think he calls that a Lydian triad. And it's like, okay, whatever. Like you can call that's not a thing. And if you want to call it that way because it makes sense to you, that's fine. Like he's describing it in his context when he's describing the triads that are present in a certain, it's like I'm totally fine with the expansion of knowledge to just give something a label as long as you are admitting that like, hey, I'm just kind of, this is how I describe it. And I got into this problem quite a bit on my channel when I just kind of give something a name, like the Mario cadence. I did a video on the Mario cadence, the double backdoor, resolution. Yep. And, I've heard that described many different ways. And there's always one or two people in there that get really offended that, why aren't you calling this by a more traditional, well, there is no name, you get to call it whatever you want. And I got to pick something, so what am I supposed to call it? The Billy Shears cadence?
Yeah, this is where things, finish.
No, that's really all I've got on
Well, obviously, like stuff like this is really difficult because I subscribe to the idea that words don't have meanings. Words only have usages. The meanings of words change over time.
Yes.
And the language adapts, and we use different words to express different things over time. I'm sure we can all think of examples of that. And I think that that's a difficult idea to marry up with what we do in education because we don't want words to change meanings. I don't think it's that words, the meanings change, but I think that over time we come up with other words that have an equivalent usage, that have a more sensible usage. I wish that we could throw away the word mixolydian and just go with dominant. To me, that makes sense. I also acknowledge that it's never going to happen, and therefore I still understand the word and I can still explain the word, and it's still something that I use with all of my students. We need to, being a good teacher, expand your vocabulary.
Yeah.
Understand many different ways of explaining the same pieces of information, and then ultimately have the one that works for you and push forward with that. Don't just do it because he did it. That's not how you move forward.
Very much agreed. Well, I can really only think of one question here that kind of fired up here. One final question, and this is real bad guitar teacher territory. And hey, like I said, we are imperfect beings, right? I'm sure we have committed some sins in our lifetime, and one of them, I just got to find out. What is the one that broke you on this one? You ever had a student that brought something in and they wanted to learn it, and it was just that bad? It was just the most horrendous, like ear-splitting, like why would you want to listen to this? And you don't tell them that. You don't want to do what my guitar teacher did and face palm. But like, have you ever gotten something in there that you just started ribbing your student at, poking at them a little bit, trying to like, okay, we can do this, but let me try to give you like, and if you have come to that conclusion, like, what was it? What was it that broke you into the cynical teacher?
Honestly, right, I can give you comical examples and genuine examples. So I had I'm in a lovely music studio that I've built over the last 6 months, and it was.
I've noticed. Yeah, congratulations on having it all finally up.
It's amazing. I could not have done this without a good friend of mine's dad. He helped me with a lot of the building work, and we worked in here doing that. So he calls me up out of the blue one day, and he's like, "Levi, I think you owe me a favour." And I'm like, "Yeah, I absolutely do. Yeah, what can I do for you?" He's like, "My granddaughter wants to learn to play guitar." And I told her I know a guy. And I was like, "Cool, no problem. Bring her over." So she comes over for a lesson. And as I say, musicality, very important. So I sit down like, What do we want to do? What are we looking to achieve out of this? Now, I think she's like 7 or 8, so really young, much younger than I'd like to teach. I'm like, what are you into? Let's see what you really enjoy. And she just started listing off all this like Swedish house mafia and things that there is no guitar in. There is no guitar that exists in this stuff. So I'm putting it on, and I don't want to bring up this example because I can't really criticize it. I can't complain about it. I can't say that it's bad, but I can look at it and say, why are you here then?
Right. Exactly.
So that one jumps out to me. But the slightly funnier one is a long-term student of mine, one of those ones that's gone off. He's at Berkeley now, actually. When I've been teaching him, I think since he was about 14, and when he first started coming to lessons with me, you know how young people can be, but they're single-minded with an influence, right?
Yes.
And his single-minded influence was Periphery.
Oh, wow.
Now,
that's a good influence, at least.
It is. I actually really enjoy Periphery, but I don't enjoy single-mindedness,
Yes.
He was so focused on this one thing, and I'm trying to, because I knew his goals were to go to Berkeley. I knew that's what he wanted to do. That was his dream. He wanted to go out and be a professional working musician, and I'm like, look, I'm all for helping you understand what's going on with Periphery's music, because I really enjoy a lot of their music. I still think the Juggernaut, Alpha Omega, is like one of the best modern progressive metal prog albums, whatever you want to call it. I think it's fantastic. But you can't have that single-minded approach. So for a good solid 6 years of working with him, every single lesson would be me making fun of Periphery a little bit, so I could just get that message in there. And he still enjoys Periphery now. We still talk all the time. He can be a little bit more honest about things now, though. He looks back and goes, "Man, what was I thinking? There's a world of music out there. I wish I'd listened." And I'm like, well, I was trying to tell you. So no, never anything truly terrible.
Yeah. That's what I was looking for. Just that, that general level of like, you can't let it slide because there's something there's just too potent of a reaction you have. Like, I'm kind of the same way. I had to my own fault. I created an obsession with Dream Theater amongst a lot of my students. So I had to kind of beat that out of them after a little while because, the same thing, that single-minded obsession there. And Dream Theater, and I kind of had this bad habit of these two kids in particular, like just showcasing them the worst moments of Dream Theater, because there were some cringy moments that I just couldn't stand. I would just be like, okay, let's listen to these. Let's listen to the bad side here for a little bit and see if this changes your outset at all. But really, one of my favorite ones was a girl the same girl I told you about that came back and wrote the song, and when she first started bringing in music, the stuff she wanted to learn was the most ridiculous music. It was like recorded on a cell phone, and it was uploaded to YouTube, and like it was not to a click track, and it was done with like it's just the worst production lo-fi. It was I'm going to say the band because it's not like I didn't hate it. It was actually really like I learned from listening to it. It was called Cyber Bully Moms Club or something like that, right? Cyber Mom Bully Club or something. But it was I kept laughing, and I wasn't laughing like this is terrible. I wasn't laughing at her. I was just laughing like I was thinking, this girl can do this.
Yeah.
This girl can one day make this kind of music. And she could probably do it in 3 years. And here she is idolizing it like it's this, like this unattainable. And I just kept laughing like, don't you realize you're about 2 years away from doing this yourself? Like, and I thought it was really cool. But she kept, I know later on, she was like, you hated that band. It's like, oh, no, I didn't hate them. I just thought it was so funny that out of all the things you wanted to bring in, that's what you really, really wanted to learn was that stuff that was like so simple and so poorly produced but it affected you. You reacted to it, and that's what matters. Now she's making music that's hopefully better produced because I made it for her. So and hopefully that affects somebody and somebody can listen to it and think the same thing.
I did a video talking about how to become a better listener in music, and it's an exercise that I'm always doing myself. I think it's about being realistic and being very objective about the things that you listen to. And I do it with everything that I listen to, and I encourage people listening to this to do the same. Whenever I listen to something, I want to try and find, no matter how much I like it, I want to find something that I can say, that thing there, I don't like that. And I try to do the same with music that I hate, or music, I hate to use the word hate, but music that doesn't grab me. In that scenario, I'm doing my best to try and find something about it that I enjoy. I think it just makes you a considerably more objective listener. I think it makes you a much better reactive listener. I think it means you listen to music in a lot more detail. I can list off every single one of my favourite albums of all time, and on every single one of them, I'll be able to point out something about them that I really don't like.
Yes.
And I think that students of music can be very single-minded and not do that. I can point out things that I hate about my own albums, and I think that's important. Do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no such thing as like we were talking about before. It's like, if you're a human, you're going to make mistakes, and there's no such thing as 100% good. Sorry, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we can find. I'm sure you and I can both find like, well, wait, this is a perfect song. I do agree. But even then, there's some things that could be improved. You think about recording technology, or you think about, the way something. There's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
But there's no such thing as the perfect production. There's no such thing as the perfect song. And one thing I was thinking about making a video on this about killing your heroes. Like your heroes all suck. They all suck. They suck just as much as you do, okay? Like, just as much as I do. They are all failing. They're all, getting things wrong. They're all getting things, incorrect sometimes. Their ego gets out of control sometimes. Like, this is being human. So, like, quit idolizing these people because you're just now defending them even when they're making mistakes.
Yeah.
And, if you start taking this in your own life, that means you're defending your own self when you're making mistakes. You're not finding the flaws in your own playing. You're not finding the flaws in your own, songwriting. And it's not like be judgmental of yourself. I don't want to be overcritical, but just accept that good comes with bad.
Yep.
There's no there's no hero out there. They don't exist.
And the problem, well, not the problem, but the thing, if you do find something that you deem to be perfect, truly perfect, then that's the thing you can criticize about it. It's too perfect. I made years ago, probably years ago, a comment on one of your videos. We were talking back and forth about inversions and things like that, and I referenced there's a Swedish band called Act, progressive rock band that I absolutely love. They sound like ABBA and Dream Theater mixed together. They're such a great band, and they have a song called I'm sure it's The Effect is the one I'm thinking of, and it honestly has what I deem to be the most perfect chorus ever recorded, especially as a study of inversions, because the voice leading in the bass through it and the way the vocal harmonies work, everything about it is flawless. And that is the thing you can criticize about it. It's too perfect. So there you go. There's Levi finding something negative.
Well, that's probably one of the best criticisms you can possibly deal with. If I'm going to have to suffer from one thing, well, I would say, if I have one fault, it is that everything I do is too perfect. So, just trying to be self-aware and humble here, but, I should probably try to tone down my perfection a little.
Yeah, the thing with like my album is obviously I'm a transcriber, so funnily enough, I've transcribed all of my album. So I have access to it in Guitar Pro. And guess what? When you play it in Guitar Pro, it's as perfect as it can be. Every single part of it is executed absolutely perfectly, but it sounds like garbage.
Yeah,
because perfection isn't all it's cracked up to be. Kill your heroes, kill your idols. None of them. Yeah, like you are already the best you that exists, and explore that. Like your imperfections are the things that make you you.
And this is there's a quote I heard one time from one of those Buddhist. It was like a Buddhist quote, and they said, I think it was the Buddha said, and I'm not a Buddhist, but I've looked into that, all sorts of different philosophies. And I think the Buddha said, if you find the Buddha walking down the street, kill him. And like, I think that's what we're talking about is the same thing. I never understood that quote, but I was thinking about, this idea of killing your heroes. Like, if anybody pretends to be this authority, they're not. Like, there's no such thing as the perfect thing to strive for. Like, and as soon as you fall into that trap, like, it's going to be a bad time. You're going to start suffering from delusions. You're going to start suffering from, some overly bearing self-criticisms. Like, there's just good and bad in everything. You can have idols, you can have people to look up to, you can have inspirations, but that's not the end of it. It's not like, okay, whatever they do is what I have to do. That doesn't exist. Everybody is going to have to take their own unique approach to it. And, take the good that you learn from somebody, take the stuff I learned from Dream Theater and apply it, take the stuff I hate about Dream Theater and throw it away and never touch it again. And, but be willing to do that. You don't have to be a fanboy and love everything that everybody does all the time. You can criticize your heroes, and you should.
Yeah.